London. If ever it felt appropriate to revisit the Twilight Zone, that moment is now. We live in strange, disorienting times, but without a Rod Serling, the debonair mastermind behind the CBS television series, to set the scene for us as he did so trenchantly more than 50 years ago. So you can practically hear a collective purr of delight when those famous for opening notes of the series' theme song are heard at the very end of the American writer and Washburn's stage adaptation of The Twilight Zone, which opened Tuesday at the Almeida Theatre in North London through January 27. What an audience will make of the preceding 2.5 hours may depend on its willingness to let a sermon invade the spook house. There was nearly always a civilizing message of sorts underpinning each episode in the TV series, which referenced other realms to say something about the troublesome one inhabited by humans. But in refashioning for the stage the smash-up of stories from Mr. Serling and his colleagues Charles Bowman and Richard Matheson, Ms. Washburn and her director, Richard Jones, can't decide whether to be playful or morally pedantic, to comment on the material or to just give it to us straight. The result feels like a half-hearted send-up that can't help but wear its tendency to lecture like a misplaced badge of honor. Ms. Washburn has mined the TV back catalogue before, dividing Almeida audiences in 2014 with the London version of her off-Broadway play Mr. Burns, which came steeped in the iconography of The Simpsons. For the record, I loved it. And she is intriguingly paired here with Mr. Jones, an Oliver Award-winning director of theatre and opera whose heightened style would seem tailor-made for this interweaving of threads from the Twilight Zone into one presumably unsettling whole. And in the opening sequence, in which an assemblage of folks at a diner must reckon with an alien in their midst, one wonders whether the play will push the self-satiric too far. One actor's delivery is as exaggeratedly deadpan as another's laugh is forced, and it isn't until we move on to the tale of a couple who awake in the night to find that their young daughter has vanished from her bed that the production finds its groove. That is, until it gets knocked sideways during the extended variant on the shelter that dominates Act 2. That's the episode of The Twilight Zone, you may remember, in which a community fretting about nuclear attack finds itself succumbing to rancor and hatred as it prepares for the worst. As tweaked by the playwright to chime with our own grievous times, the discussion widens twofold: racism and xenophobia into the mix, a laudable impulse, in principle, that has the paradoxical effect of stopping the production dead in its tracks in favor of the sort of heavy-going debate that one might find in the comments section of many an article online. In design terms, the aptly monochrome nature of Paul Steinberg's set enfolds the action within an enormous TV screen that frames the stage, within which is suspended a second, smaller screen on which snippets get played out. The deliberately low-tech usage of props swirling in and out of view begins to pall after a while, as do rotating discs emblazoned with period cytopenia or equations like E=mc superscript 2, the proceedings watched over by a starry galaxy suggesting dimensions unknown. The spectral lighting is by the expert Minnie Jordan Sharon. The 10-strong cast plus 3 supernumeraries on hand to move scenery easily juggles multiple roles, even if their assignments sometimes pad a production that loses focus along the way. The vampy song and dance number for the musical theatre actress Lizzie Conley late in Act 1 doesn't deliver, and you may be surprised to find a talking doll able to quote Norma Desmond from Sunset Boulevard. There's a potential head-scratcher in a running gag involving the mysterious appearance, or absence, of cigarettes until one recalls that Mr. Serling, an avid smoker, had advertised Chesterfields on air. In performance terms, the production is inevitably dominated by John Marquez, a regular in Mr. Jones' theatre work over the years, as this show's very own Serling equivalent, referred to only as narrator. Possessed of the series creator's strong eyebrows, Mr. Marquez leads us into a world of the unknown, rife with admonitions about the here and now. And it's surely not this fine actor's fault if one feels an urge to change a late in the play reference from a little hectoring to a more accurate abiding preachiness, of which there is quite a lot. The Royal Court, to its credit, remains the London playhouse that most consistently broadens the perspective on our world, as its concurrent offerings bear out, albeit to mixed results. Both plays finish December 23. Upstairs in the 89-seat studio space is Bad Roads from Natal Vorozhbit, the Ukrainian playwright whose piece, set on the eastern Donbas region of Ukraine, amounts to a grim report from the front line of a country besieged by violence and war. The English language translation is by Sasha Dugdale. Occurring within a pine forest that would seem to be shedding its skin, the 6 stories on view introduce us to a citizenry eager to save theirs. The director is Vicky Featherstone, who runs the Royal Court and has led us before into a Twilight Zone-like landscape of foreboding and fear. Bad Roads gains in immediacy from its status as an essential dispatch from an actual locale that most of us will never see, even if the extremes of human behavior depicted here surely know no boundaries. The less compelling Goats, downstairs on the main stage, refracts the war in Syria through the disturbing lens of a communal landscape that aims to reward families who have lost a son with compensation in the form of a goat. The study in martyrdom and in keeping going when lives are appended, like Wayaji's plate translated by Catherine Halls, devolves into shouty overkill in the second act, risky considering that quite a few audience members did not return after intermission. On the other hand, there's no denying the appeal, in the theatre year that has already seen the revival of Edward Albee's metaphor-laden A Goat, of finding 6 actual quadrupeds sharing the proceedings with a hard-working cast that cannot help but be upstaged by the gentle creatures. The animals, whose names include Beak, Squeak and Bell, communicate a preternatural sense of calm that may represent the best corrective of all to a fractious age.